Hey guys, today's video is another installment in my repurposing makeup series, and we are talking all about alternative ways of using foundations. With makeup, there's really nothing worse than a bad looking foundation, whether it's too cakey, too matte, too shiny, or it doesn't wear well throughout the day. It can be really tempting to just go ahead and ditch that foundation, get rid of it altogether, because, who wants to wear foundation that looks bad on their skin? I mean, it's literally the foundation of your makeup look. But there are so many different ways that you can put those foundations to use if you don't like them as a standalone foundation. And even if it's a foundation that you do like, but maybe you're trying to use it up before it expires, these are some other ways that you can use them, make them go farther, and get even more use out of them so that you can use them up if that's what you're trying to do. So I'm going to do this video, get ready with me style, and I'm going to demonstrate a bunch of these tips for you today. So let's go ahead and hop into my tips for repurposing foundations. So my first tip for repurposing your foundations is to mix them with a moisturizer. What most people don't realize is that pretty much any foundation can be made into a skin tint if you just mix it with either a moisturizer or maybe a hydrating primer or serum. Now, it may take some trial and error to figure out which formulas work well mixed together, but before you go out and buy a skin tint, you can probably just use one of the foundations that you already have along with your moisturizer to get the same exact effect. So I'm going to demonstrate this with the fullest coverage foundation that I own. This is the ColourPop Pretty Fresh foundation. This has pretty high medium coverage, I would say. So I'm just going to take about a half a pump of that. Normally I would use a full pump all over the face, and then I'm just going to take some of a moisturizer. I'm going to use the Paula's Choice C5 Super Boost Moisturizer, and I'm going to do, that was probably too big of a pump of that. I'm going to take a little bit of that away, just like rub it into my hand, and then just mix those two together. Both of these formulations, I checked the ingredient lists, both of these formulations are water-based, so I think that's really the key, is you want to make sure you're not mixing, say, an oil-based or even like a silicone-based moisturizer with a water-based foundation. But the first ingredient on both of these is water, so I'm thinking they should play well together. And if you have any foundations in your collection that you feel are like too thick or maybe too high coverage for you, you can always try out this trick before you give up on the foundation altogether. Okay, I actually think those two made a really nice combo. Doesn't that look pretty? And I blended it out with a sponge. If you want to have a little more coverage, you could also just use your fingers or a brush, but I like using a sponge. And I feel like it looks really good. I definitely, of course, have less coverage than I normally would get from this foundation, but it looks a lot more natural. Really doesn't look like I'm wearing any foundation. A lot of these tips do revolve around mixing things together, creating your own little cocktails of products. So if you have the opposite problem and you have a foundation that's too light coverage, you can always bump up the coverage by just adding a couple drops of a concealer. And I'm also a really big fan of just playing around with different combinations of foundations, or even a foundation and a concealer, or a foundation and a primer. If you have several foundations and concealers, primers in your collection, you have basically endless possibilities for different combinations and mixtures that you can try. So if you have any foundations that you just don't really like the way they look on their own, you can always see how they might work when mixed with a different foundation. You might actually end up finding a combination of two foundations that you like even better than any of your individual foundations by themselves. So let's say you have one foundation that you feel like just looks too dry, heavy, cakey on your skin. Try mixing that with one of your lighter coverage foundations or with a tinted moisturizer. Another thing that I've really enjoyed is mixing some kind of illuminating primer with a foundation. I really like using the Charlotte Tilbury Hollywood Flawless filter as a mixer. It just adds a little boost of that luminosity and glow to any product that you mix it with. And the nice thing about this, or if you have any similar products to this or any of the dupes that are out there, it does have a little bit of coverage to it, so it's not going to completely water down your foundation, take away much coverage, but it does add just a little bit more of that skin-like glow to whatever you mix it with. Another great way to repurpose a foundation is to use it either as a concealer, or you can mix it with a concealer that you find too thick or heavy. So I'm going to do this with my e.l.f. Hydrating Camo Concealer. I like this concealer a lot on its own, but some days I want something just a little bit lighter weight, and most foundations are going to be just a little bit thinner, have a little bit lower coverage than a high coverage concealer like this. So I am going to take some of this concealer on the back of my hand, and then I'm going to mix a couple drops of my Urban Decay Hydromaniac foundation. It does have lighter coverage than most concealers, and it is very hydrating. So it's just going to take away some of the thickness of that e.l.f. Hydrating Camo Concealer. So now that I have those mixed together, I'm just adding that under my eye. And I'm also going to use what's left of that on the back of my hand to just spot conceal my face as well. My next tip is one that works well for both foundations and concealers. So any foundation or concealer that you have that you just don't love to use as a foundation, like all over your face, this is a great way to put those to use. You're going to use it in just a very targeted area, and you're using a pretty small amount. So this tip is to mix your foundations with any lipstick, specifically liquid lipsticks, but really any lipstick will work, to create a custom blush shade. I am going to try this with one of my boldest lip colors that I have. This is the Urban Decay Vice Lip Bond in the shade Once Strangers. It's a nice reddish chocolatey brown color, and I want to try this out as a blush, but clearly this shade on its own is probably going to be a little too pigmented for me to just go in directly onto my cheeks with. So what you're going to do is just take about that much on the back of your hand, just like one applicator's worth, apply it there. And this really works well with any foundation or concealer I've found. The formula doesn't really seem to matter too much, because really what you're doing is just using your foundation to sheer out the color. So let's see if I got a good ratio there. I think that should work. It's almost looking like more of a contour shade now that I think about it. So let's just try this on my cheeks and see how it looks. I might actually end up just using this as a contour now that I'm realizing that looks like a shade I would use for contour. So let's do that instead. And I was going to say the same thing could be done if you have any liquid blushes or liquid bronzers in your collection that maybe are too pigmented for you. Just mix a little foundation in there and you'll probably end up with a much more easy to work with shade. Alright, just blending that out now. Okay, so it's kind of a cross between a blush and a contour shade. It's looking a little more reddish as I'm blending it out. Of course, if I had used less foundation, I would be getting more of the liquid lipstick pigment in there. So, you know, play around with different ratios and just see what works for you. But I actually think that is looking really nice as a bronzer, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, I think that's really pretty. Really nice shade for the fall, too. It's really taking on more of like a mauvey taupe sort of color. Another thing you can do if you have any foundations in your collection that are the wrong shade, maybe you have a foundation that's too dark, you could either use it on its own as a liquid bronzer if it's, you know, the right shade for that, or you can use it to adjust the shades of foundations that are too light. Same goes for foundations that are too light. Use them as a shade adjuster. You could also use foundations that are kind of the wrong shade to be used all over your face as an actual foundation. You can use those as your mixers with liquid lipsticks, because they're still going to work to adjust the shade of the liquid lipstick, but it doesn't matter so much that the foundation actually matches your skin tone, since you're mixing it with another color anyway. Another way to repurpose your foundations is to create a custom lipstick shade. So similar to the lipstick as blush trick, we're going to use a foundation to adjust the shade of a lipstick that's a little bit darker than what I want to wear for today's look. So I'm going to do this with my current Shop My Stash bold lipstick. This is the Urban Decay Vice lipstick in the shade Olvera. A nice reddish orange. I do like this shade on its own on my lips, but it's a pretty bold color. So I'm just applying that to the back of my hand, and then I'm going to take a little bit of my foundation again. I'm just using the same one because this is my Project Pan foundation, and this is of course a great way to stretch those foundations and get, you know, even more use out of them than you otherwise would. So I'm just going to take a little drop of foundation, not much, because you can always add more if you want to lighten it even more. Ooh, okay, this is creating like a really fun coral shade. So then you can pick this up with a lip brush. Actually, this is a concealer brush that I'm going to use, but I do want to use what's on my finger here. So I'm just going to go in with that. By the way, this tip totally works for concealers as well. In fact, I did share this tip in my repurposing concealers video. But the nice thing about this foundation is more hydrating than most concealers would be. So this is probably going to feel a little bit more hydrating on my lips than a concealer would feel. So I just applied what was on my finger to my lips. Now I'm just going to pick up a little bit more with my brush just to get a more precise application. That looks so good. It looks completely different from the original lipstick shade too. Like, let's just compare the original color to what's on my lips right now. So this is a swatch of that lipstick on its own. So fun. If you showed me this lip color, I would never be able to guess that I used this lipstick to create it. So keep that in mind before you buy a new lipstick color. A lot of times you might be able to get the effect you're looking for by just mixing a lipstick you already have with other products in your collection, whether it's a foundation or concealer, or a liquid blush that you have, or just another lipstick in your collection. The options are endless, even if you don't have a huge collection. And really what I'm trying to get across in these videos is that regardless of the size of your makeup collection, even if you have a pretty small collection, there are so many different products essentially hiding in your makeup collection that you've never tried before by pairing products together and mixing things together. Like, for example, this lip color. And there are so many other lip colors in my collection that I've yet to try that I can do the same thing with. Alright, so I'm back with my eyeshadow finished. I've decided I want to add a little bit of a brown to this lip color to tie it in with the eye look, make it a little bit more neutral-ish. So I'm taking my Kokie lip liner in Nude, and I'm just going to use that on kind of the outer edges of my lips. And then I'm just blending that out with my finger. I decided I need a little bit more blush, so I mixed up a little more lipstick and foundation. I'm just adding that to my cheeks. I'm actually just going to blend it out with my fingers this time. So that is my finished look today, and those are all the tips that I'm going to demonstrate on my face, but a couple more tips I wanted to mention. Another thing you could use foundations for, especially ones that you don't love on your face, you could try using them as a body foundation. Now, definitely be careful about, this transferring onto clothing. You probably don't want to do this if you're wearing really light colored clothing, but you could use some on your legs if you want to even out your legs. Maybe you're taking photos or something, and you just want to even out the skin on your legs, or any part of your body that you want to just kind of even out. You could go straight in with a foundation, or you could mix your foundation with a body lotion to sheer it out a little bit so that it's not just like a thick foundation. And similarly, another tip for foundations that you just don't love on your face, you could designate those to be the foundation that you blend down onto your neck and chest, or even onto your ears. Usually your neck and chest are a little bit more forgiving than your face because you don't have as many visible pores or oil glands in that area, and you're usually using such a sheer layer of foundation on the neck and chest anyway that even if it's a formula you don't love on your face, you probably won't mind it for that purpose, and that way you could still get some use out of it. So those are my best tips for repurposing your foundations. Let us know in the comments below if you have any other alternative ways of using foundations. If you want to watch more videos like this, I will link my repurposing makeup playlist down below. I've done a bunch of other categories now, but thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you had fun. If you did, be sure to give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and hopefully I will talk to you again very soon in my next video. Bye.